Welcome, everyone. I was joking around because the last time I was here, I was about 37 weeks pregnant, so I was kind of out to here, if you remember. And now, yes, we do have two lovely boys, Ayan and Ishan, at home, which is the poor babysitter, hopefully. She's doing okay at home with that. But the fact that you've given up part of your Saturday afternoon to be here really means one thing. It means you're hungry, not for the great snacks that are here, but it means that you're hungry to seek knowledge, to seek expertise, and to potentially change your life. So as Mark was saying, I'm Shahana Alibhai. I'm, of course, Dr. Alibhai's wife. I'm a mother, and I'm a family doctor that practices in Abbotsford. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that really fascinates me. The topic is resiliency. And I want to talk to you about my observations with resiliency within my practice. But to start, let me set the stage. So I work at two specialized clinics in Abbotsford. The first is the Abbotsford Breast Health Clinic. So at least once or even twice a shift, I'm required to enter the room of a patient I don't know and who doesn't know me, and tell them that they have breast cancer. You can imagine how difficult this is. I've done this hundreds of times now, and it never gets easier, nor should it get easier. Our clinic is involved in the diagnosis of breast cancer, but after that, we send them off for further treatment. So I often don't get to see these women again. But I go home and I think about their faces, I think about their families, and I think about how they did on their journey ahead. On another day, I'm at the Youth Health Center. The Abbotsford Youth Health Center is a great clinic. We work with youth ages 12 to 24, and many of these youth have a story. They've come from broken homes, they have a history of substance abuse, mental health issues, or even suicidality. Now, if you look at a youth like this, that's not lie, it's easy to judge, it is. You might see that, oh, they look lazy, or unmotivated. That is until you actually sit down with them one-on-one and really hear their story. So what do these two groups of people, these two groups of diverse people have in common? They both have had to face incredible hardships in their life, but there seems to be this subset within this population that no matter the hardship, they can bounce back. They actually thrive in the face of hardship. What is that? What makes some people so determined, so motivated, so resilient? Resiliency is defined as the ability to bounce back or cope successfully despite adverse circumstances. It used to be thought of that you were either born resilient or not. You have it or you don't. Well, luckily for most of us, it's now being thought of to be a dynamic, modifiable process that you can actually foster in your own life. If we look at all of the literature, there's a lot of things or protective factors that can bolster resiliency in somebody. These can be things like having an easygoing personality style, things like knowing when to ask for help, or even a sense of humor makes somebody resilient. But when I looked at all of the literature and I compared it to my own experience, these were the three themes that kept coming up over and over again. So if you remember nothing else from today, just remember this slide, that if you were ever to face hardship in your life, this is almost like a recipe that you can take away that can bolster resilience in your own life. So these three things are connection, finding a sense of purpose, and a word I just love, you can use it too, grit, and I'll explain more about that later. So with each of these three topics, I'm going to leave you with one or two takeaways that you can start implementing in your life even today. Let's start with connection. This idea of belonging, finding a sense of community. Loneliness is being called an epidemic, with 1 in 5 Canadians suffering from this stress. In fact, a recent study looked at the outcomes of loneliness and found it to be as detrimental as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. It's amazing, right? No one can deny the power of connection, especially when tragedy strikes. It wasn't that long ago that we woke up with the town of Humboldt when they found out the news of the tragic bus crash. The news reported how people in that community came together in the hockey arena because they needed a place for solitude, to regroup, to connect. Connection can also be used in a very positive circumstance for survivorship. For those of you who don't know, this is a picture of a breast in a boat, or dragon boat racing for breast cancer survivors. It's something that we, the Vancouverites, should be very proud of because it was started in Vancouver in 1996 by Dr. Doug McKenzie. It went out to prove that breast cancer survivors can and will and do lead very active, fulfilling lives after their treatment. It has now gone on to become an international sensation. It would be easy for me to tell you to just join a support group or join a book club. But the true answer is these are two ways that you can foster connection. The first actually is volunteering. Volunteering is actually being shown to be a treatment for depression. It is that powerful. It improves your life satisfaction, it improves your overall health scores, and it decreases your mortality. If volunteering isn't for you, then I encourage you to do this. Be vulnerable. I don't mean pouring your heart and soul out, but vulnerability, defined by Dr. Brené Brown, is the courage to stand up and truly be seen. And I have to tell you, I've been using this in my own life with my own circle of friends, and actually having real conversations with them. And I think so much of the time we worry that we're going to be met with distance and reject if we start to really expose what we want and what we feel, when the exact opposite is usually true. The second theme, if you remember the three, one was connect. The second is purpose, or finding your sense of purpose. Now, Dr. Alibhai will go into much more detail about this. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but it's all about finding your why, finding your overall sense of what you want to achieve in your life. Now, when I meet with the youth, you can imagine these are very hard discussions that we often have because they come in with a context of problems that sometimes blows my mind. But to regroup, I often ask them, just tell me, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you graduate? I'll never forget this 14-year-old patient that I had not that long ago who was going through some serious mental and emotional challenges. And right away she looked at me and said, you know, Dr. Alibhai, I either want to be a neuroscientist or an astrophysicist. But I've been giving it some thought and I think I'll be an astrophysicist because I like space. It was incredible. She literally let her dreams lead her to the sky. And I love that about youth, that no matter what hardship she was going through, she could aim as high as she wanted to aim. There's a vastness to youth. They don't edit or limit their ambitions, and that's a lesson to learn from them. On the other hand, when I meet with women at the breast health clinic and I break the diagnosis to them, you can imagine a lot of them are moms. So I often get the question, how do I tell my children? What advice do you have for me? For many of us, especially moms in the room, I think you can understand that as soon as you have kids, your priorities shift, your focus shifts, and your purpose shifts. Suddenly that's your identity, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong in that. So what is your takeaway here? It actually comes in the form of a story. So for you really to understand what your purpose is, you have to know what means the most to you in your life. So let me tell you. A philosophy professor stood at the front of his class, and he had an empty mason jar, and he filled it with large rocks. And he asked his class, is this jar full? The class said, yes, it's full. He went and he dumped some pebbles in there, gave the jar a shake, and asked, is the jar full? The class said again, yes, it's full. Then he dumped a whole bunch of sand, shook the jar again, and the class said, okay, yes, now it is full. The analogy here is that the big rocks are the most important things in your life, the things that give you purpose, your health, your family. The pebbles are the things that matter to you, but you could live without, your interests, your hobbies, your home. The sand is all of that excess stuff, the excess noise we have in our heads, the social media, the television, all of the material possessions we somehow feel that we need. The bottom line is that if you fill your jar first with sand, all the frivolous stuff, you're never going to have room for what matters. So identify what your rocks are first. Last but not least, let's talk about grit. Like I said, one of my favorite words. So just the other day, I was meeting with a young man who was 17 at the youth clinic. And like I always do, I asked him, tell me about your family history. So he looked at me and said, I know nothing about my family history. So I kind of prodded and said, why is that? He said, well, I was born into the foster care system. When I was born, both my parents were in jail. So I looked at him, and I guess I looked a little bit taken aback. So right away, and with something in his eyes, he looked at me and said, don't feel sorry for me. So I looked at him and I said, I don't feel sorry for you. I'm impressed by you. And I'm excited to see the way you're going to change the trajectory of your life. So when I asked him, what do you want to do? I want to be an engineer. This kid, he was 17, he had everything against him, but he had one goal. He was going to become an engineer, and nothing was going to stop him. There was substance abuse all around him. He suffered with a lot of mental health challenges. But he would go on YouTube and actually do cognitive behavioral therapy on himself because he couldn't afford counseling. And he would share his tips and techniques with me. That's motivation. That's grit. So what is grit? According to leading expert and psychologist Angela Duckworth, grit is power of passion and perseverance over a long period of time. It's the ability to have a goal and do whatever you need to do to reach that goal, no matter the hardships that you face. One of the best examples of grit is someone I look up to, is Tony Robbins. And I'm sure you all have heard of Tony Robbins, but for those of you who don't know about him, he came from an extremely broken home with an abusive mother, with hardly any security in his life. But he had one mission, very similar to this. He was obsessed with the fact that why do some people who face hardship thrive and others succumb? And he made it his life's work to change people's lives, which has catapulted him into becoming one of the most successful, motivational speakers of all times. So, how do you get grittier? How do you improve grit? Well, even expert Angela Duckworth on her TED Talk, now viewed over 13 million times, says, I don't know. But there is one concept that might help to improve grit, and that is having a growth mindset. This is such a big topic, we could spend an hour discussing it. So my takeaway here, for anybody who's on the Stuart Chiropractic mailing list, or if you give us your mailing at your email, there's a great TED Talk by Dr. Carol Dweck, The Power of Believing You Can Improve, and it's 10 minutes that will potentially change your life. She talks about having a growth mindset. So here's an example. Imagine I'm a high school student, and I get my exam paper back, and it says F. That doesn't make me feel so good. But say if I get another paper back, and it says, not yet. Not yet. Doesn't mean I've failed. It means that my learning is on a trajectory, and eventually I'll get there. Like my generation, I feel that we're so afraid of failure. We almost live our life as a tightrope, that if any challenge comes our way, we don't know what to do. I know Dr. Alibhai and I, with our kids right now, we really work hard on praising their effort, not their outcome. It doesn't matter, they're only 3 and 1, so they don't do much yet, but eventually they'll do something. But we work on praising their effort. So when I talk about all of this, I'm not just preaching. I'm not just saying, do this, do that. I'm talking from personal experience, and here's my moment to get vulnerable with you. Last year, I talked very openly how after the birth of our first child, who's now 3, I suffered a lot with postpartum anxiety, not knowing at all what it was and being in complete denial. It was a really, really difficult time. I used these 3 techniques, connection, purpose, and grit, to help me get me through that and not really knowing it at that time. I tried to connect myself with other moms and mom and baby groups and found understanding and social support that only moms who have been up all night can understand. I started to really think about my sense of purpose, that it's okay that I want to be a mom and work part-time and be at home. And also that the fact that I love public speaking and I want to do more of this. And in terms of the grit part, well, I'm still working on that one. So I hope and pray that everyone in this room never has to use these strategies and never has to face any hardships in their life. But we know life doesn't work that way. You know, life can be cruel and unpredictable, and I see that every day. And it can be cruel and unpredictable at the worst and the best of times. But when I think about my 2 boys, I think about what I want them to achieve in their life. And when I put them to sleep, and when I kiss them goodnight, my prayer is that they grow up to be resilient men with a strong sense of purpose and the grittiest of grit you could ever imagine. And I hope that for you too. Thank you.